awesome semester series about the church. What is the church, right? We've been talking about these pictures of the church, different analogies that the Bible gives us to explain who we are as the church. What is our identity as the people of God? So what are some ones that stand out to you guys that you remember, Katie?
The bride and the army.
The church is like God's, Jesus' bride, right? And the church is like God's army. Yeah, I meant. The body. The church is Jesus' body. Hunter?
The flock.
The flock, yeah. The church is the flock of God. Okay, so we've gotten some really cool pictures of what the church is defined as, and hopefully that helps us understand who we are and how we are to live. Like when we get an example of something in the Bible, it's always for a purpose. So, are we up there? So today I get to introduce my most favorite person in the world, my husband Mitch, who is going to. So he's gonna give you guys yet another picture that the Bible gives us about what does it mean that we're the people of God, the church. So go for it.
All right. Yeah. Wow.
Cold air.
Just a second. He's got lots of props here. All right. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this morning. Thank you that we are a part of your family. Thank you that you have adopted us into your family as your kids, as your children. And we also thank you especially just that we are a part of a family that is like no other family throughout the whole world and throughout the history of the world. That the family of God is set apart, and we are thankful for that. And that's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. You can put up the slide there, Chris. So we're going to be talking about God's church, us as believers being the family of God, and more specifically, what it means to be adopted into God's family as His children. So I have to say I love a good PowerPoint presentation. Yesterday I spent like 30 minutes on slide number 1. I googled little kids dancing around the world and just loved what came up. Eat that up, there's a lot of truth in it. I almost just did the whole talk from that picture. But I do want to say from the beginning, just by way of introduction, and can you guys hear me from the back? Am I loud enough? Okay. Just by way of introduction, every time I speak in front of a group, I've made it a goal to make sure I hammer home at least one significant theme. I'm pretty scatterbrained as a person, so if I don't do that, I usually talk about 100 things that don't make sense. So for today, I'm just going to state that from the beginning, and that, as we talk about the church and the time of Christ, the initial start of the church and the expansion of the church 2,000 years ago until now, starting in Jerusalem and getting all the way over to Kansas City, I believe that the church has been defined by two great passions. It was true 2,000 years ago and it's true today, and those two passions are a group of people that have a radical love for God and a sacrificial love for one another. And so that's what we want to become, and so my goal this morning is to challenge us to take one step further in those two areas. So a radical love for God and a sacrificial love for one another. And I feel like y'all are doing that, but I want to challenge us to go further. And as we continue to grow in that, the gospel in the church will continue to explode into every school, into every sports team, into every neighborhood, into every place of work here in our city. So that gets me excited this morning. And I want to say too that I feel like there are generally two types of people that are here. The first are those that have a real, genuine heart for the church. Your heart is broken over those that don't know the Lord yet. You have a passion to disciple younger believers. You have a heart for just the health and the well-being and the growth of the church, and you're excited to be here. And I know those types of people are here because I get to hang out with you. I know what you do doesn't just stop in here, but it carries out to the streets. I get to hang out with you at Revolution. I get to go to Haiti with you. I get to haul bags of concrete in the hood with some of you guys. Where's my concrete team? Right here. The biggest guys. So I know you guys are here. And then the other type of person is the person that is here because it's what you do every Sunday. You're here because you're just wanting to maybe appease your parents. You're here because they have maybe forced you to come, and your heart just isn't in it. There's no real emotion. You're not real excited. And I know those types of people are here because I was one of them. All throughout junior high and high school, I was the one that was always sitting in the back, eating donuts and playing foosball. And the guy speaking would be like, "Who is that kid back there? Dang it!" And then there was one day, and I still remember it, it just ticked me off, at youth group, our youth leader, kind of like Corey, we were playing a game, and he ripped my necklace off, and it just, and I was like, "That's it, last straw, I'm done, I'm out." He didn't apologize or anything, so that was the last thing for me. I didn't come back to youth group for a while. So I know both of those types of people are here, and I just want you guys to kind of search your hearts and be honest with yourself. And I want to share just a minute about how I moved from no desire for the church at all to a passion for church and a conviction to be a part of church. And that mainly happened for me when I spent a year in Indonesia. It was a year after I graduated from college, and it was the first time in my life that I realized that the church doesn't exist in every part of the world. I sort of thought that what I had grown up with in Kansas is how it was in Africa or Saudi Arabia or Indonesia, and not the case. I landed in a city of 100,000 Muslims. And my teammate, the guy that I was with, a guy named Jordan, that first Sunday, we're kind of like, "Hey dude, where are we going to go to church?" And we quickly realized there was no church for us. And so we formed a church at our house with him and I, 2 people. And one of the first verses that we wrestled through was Matthew 18:20 that says, "Where for 2 or 3 come together in my name, I will be there with them." That's Jesus speaking. And so we sang songs, we'd study the scripture, we'd listen to sermons online, and pretty soon our 2 Muslim roommates joined us for church. And so I want to challenge you guys, especially the ones that don't have a real excitement or a passion or a conviction to be here, that this is not normal. This is unique, this is special, and this is truly a gift from God that you all have this community and this church. So I wanted to, I've got 2 people, Kristen Pitkin, pass out the pictures. I came across a super cool book with pictures of people throughout the world. And so you're going to be looking at photographs of people, most of which are kids, most of which are from countries like India, like Bangladesh, Pakistan, Iraq, Indonesia, And I did a little research. All of these, if you would just look at it for like 2 seconds and pass it on. There's not enough for everybody. So just, send it throughout. But I want y'all to realize that these kids from the countries that they are from, on average, their countries are less than 4% Christian. So there's a pretty good chance that this individual that you're looking at doesn't have an SML, doesn't have any sort of a church, any sort of a Bible study or a youth group. So think about that. Don't get too comfortable here, because this is special and it's a gift from God. Oh, and also, so we're thinking about these kids that I want us to have compassion on. I was thinking about what other kids should we have compassion on. And I wanted to get a picture of Tori when he was a kid. So I called his mom the other day, and she sent a picture of Tori, and so I threw it up. It's on the next slide. I bet y'all didn't know Tori used to be a little girl.
I did.
He bathed in a water bucket.
Surprisingly, that doesn't surprise a lot of people. It does kind of look like me as a kid, actually.
So let's go to the next slide, please. So this will be our text for the morning. I'd like to read it. But when the right time came, God sent his Son, born of a woman, subject to the law. God sent him to buy freedom for us who were slaves to the law, so that he could adopt us as his very own children. And because we are his children, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, prompting us to call out, Abba, Father. Now you are no longer a slave, but God's own child. And since you are his child, God has made you his heir. That's Galatians 4:4-7. So this might sound crazy, but this last week, as I was wrestling through this passage, the only thing I could think about was barnwood. Does that make sense to you guys? For Kristen, she's like, oh yeah, totally. I talk about barnwood with her almost on a day-to-day basis. I love barns and barnwood and making things out of barnwood. And so I'm always trying to make analogies about the gospel and barnwood. So let's unpack that. To start, I've got a video.
When they were building these barns, they probably had no idea that 100 years later, that some people would be coming to take them down to build furniture out of them. They had no idea about that, but yet I think that they would somehow feel honored, that the wood is living on and is not just gonna fall someday and rot or be burned.
It's something that we all experience. We all experience second chances to right wrongs and to become new again and to make improvements in our own lives.
It's fun to sort of play the role of creator, taking something that has no meaning or value and no purpose and creating it into something spectacular, redeeming it. I'm Mitch Trump. I'm the principal owner and craftsman at Adventure Indoors.
I'm Ryan, and I am a craftsman with Adventure Indoors Woodworking.
Awesome. That's it. Does that get you fired up? Some of you probably don't know, but that's what I get to do on a day-to-day basis. Is I am a part of a company that we build furniture, and a lot of the material that we use is barnwood. Let's go to the next slide. So, becoming children, a basic 3-part process. We're going to work through our passage in 3 chunks. And we're going to break that down in each part of the process, becoming a child and becoming adopted into the family of God. We're going to relate that to what I get to do with Barnwood. And so hopefully that'll create an image in your mind that will make more sense to you guys as we work through this. So starting step 1, I've called it the pursuit, and that is from verse 4, God sent his son. Step 2, we have the capture, and that is from verse 5. It says, so that he could adopt us as his very own children. Step 3 is the new way of life. And that starts in verse 7 with emphasis on the now. So now you are no longer a slave, but God's own child. Let's go to the next slide. So starting with the pursuit, God sent his son. So as a company, what we do is we have a customer who contacts us with a project that they are interested in. So that's the first step. Then we start kind of wrestling through and processing where are we going to find the material to build this. And so we start the pursuit of chasing down the right barn, the right type of material to build that project. This is a process that we are very determined. It's a process that is, from a business perspective, is a little risky because I'm sending out guys that I'm paying to go find barnwood that they might not even find. We'll spend days sometimes driving around looking for old barns. And what we do is when we find the potential barn, a lot like this one here down in Spring Hill, that's collapsing, we find the closest house and we knock on the door and say, hey, can we have your barn? And a lot of times they're cool with it because these barns have no more functional value or purpose to them. There's only been one time, as far as I can remember, that an old dude, an old farmer, came to the door and threatened to get his shotgun if they could get off his property. So most of the time, these farmers are pretty nice. One other thing I want to say is that when we're chasing down the barnwood that we're looking for, we, as craftsmen, as creators, we are able to see that something that looks trashy like this and has no value or function actually has tremendous potential. A lot of people in the world would say, that's crap, like what are you doing with that? There's no value in that. And so we, in a sense, as a company, we are sold out to finding barns, and we never give up. Because if we can't find the right barn, if we can't get a hold of the material, then we don't have a company. We don't have a business. We don't have a product. And so it takes a lot of time. I brought as a prop a piece of a barnwood. This is pretty raw. It's pretty nasty looking. It probably smells a little bit like cow pee. Because cattle for years are stored in these barns and they just pee all over the place. So the wood smells, it's dirty. This right here is a hole from a bee that just straight just eats his way through. You got nail holes, probably broken off nails in there. But again, as a craftsman and a creator, I see that there's actually potential in this. It's not to be thrown out or burned, but we could probably make something. So then relating that to God sent his son. Basically, it's going to be a super quick overview, but thousands of years ago, God creates the world. And his people jack it up. We mess up. And so God sets into motion his rescue mission, his rescue plan to get his people back to himself, to get lost, broken people to become children, to become a part of his family. So for thousands of years, God sends prophets, he sends kings, he sends shepherds and angels. He creates these awesome miracles, but his people are stubborn and they still don't get it. And so what God's doing is he's pursuing us. He's pursuing his people with his love. And so he pursues and he pursues and he pursues until the pinnacle of God's redemptive story happens. It's something he planned from day one, but he comes himself, right, in the person of Jesus. And so when Jesus comes, you and I, are a lot like this barn. We're a lot like this wood. We're rough. We're dirty. Some of us are stinky. So that reminds me of a great passage, Romans 5:8, that says, while we were still sinners, while we were still messed up, Christ died for us. Okay, and so a lot of us, even still today, feel kind of like this barn. We feel isolated. We feel forgotten by the world. We feel like maybe we don't have any potential or any purpose for our future. But that's the good news of what Christ came for, was to redeem this and to clean it up, peel back the surface layers and find something valuable inside. So that's step one, the pursuit. Another great passage for that is John 1:14. From the Message, it says that the Word became flesh and moved into the neighborhood. And so God puts on skin, becomes Jesus, and lives among us. Okay, so that's the pursuit. Let's go to step two, next slide. So step two, I'm calling it the capture. And that's from verse 5 of our passage. I'll read that again. So that he could adopt us as his very own children. And let's just put that with step one. God sent us, comma, so that he could adopt us as his very own children. And so here's a picture on the left at a different barn from the picture before. But this is me and the crew of guys that I work with. And this, for me, is a crazy part of the process because there is such an integration of joy and sorrow. And the joy is that we have found a sweet barn and there's awesome wood in it. And I'm already starting to visualize, what are we going to use this wood for? How much board feet is here? What's the species? Is it southern pine? Is it oak? Is it walnut? And so my mind is just churning, and I'm so excited. Kristen knows that the days that I get to go to a barn instead of the shop, I'm pumped. So one hand you have the joy, the other hand you have sorrow. And the sorrow is that at the end of the day, this picture here, I'm feeling like a 90-year-old man because I just worked my butt off taking almost the entire roof off. We're up on the roof hacking with an axe, hacking away wood shakes from 100 years ago that are all rotted. There's dust flying in our face. We're getting all dirty. My beard is just packed with dirt. It's pretty gnarly. And so there's sorrow. And I have thoughts, what am I doing? I'm regretting my decision to do this as a business. I'm like, why aren't I sitting in an office listening to music, playing Tetris on the computers? Because that's what awesome people do. At least in my perception. So joy and sorrow, and then we get the barn down, we load it up on our trailer, and we take it back to the shop. This picture on the right is me and a few guys, and we are working the material. We've power washed it, we've sanded it, we've planed it. I'm right there fixing some of the flaws. There are still some old cracks in the wood, so I have to insert a certain type of wood to get it to prevent it from splitting more. So in the shop, we take great care of the wood. It's a slow, meticulous process, and we're getting more and more excited as the process is happening because we're getting to see that just a few days ago, this wood was in a barn. Nobody knew about it. And it's already becoming something new. And so we're getting pumped. So let's now talk about part 2 of the process and what Jesus does in our life. I'll read that again. So that he could adopt us as his very own children. And what I thought about in this process is the cross. You know, for us as a company, when we're getting this barnwood, there is a great cost involved. Sometimes we get the barns for free, but we're actually risking our lives. You know, I can think of probably 4 or 5 times vividly in my mind, and my heart just sank because my foot slipped through the roof as I was walking, or a beam came crashing down at my head. There was a time, Craig talked about it not too long ago, that a roof caved in and John and I were holding each other, weeping in each other's arms. But I was thinking on the way here, I would be a proud man if I could die in the arms of John Craig. So there is a great risk and cost involved, and that's the exact same times 10,000 with Jesus and what he did to purchase our adoption. You know, when families adopt a kid, sometimes from China or Africa, there is a great price involved. I've heard $20,000, $30,000 just for a single adoption. And what Jesus did was he poured out his blood on the cross, and that was the price to purchase our adoption. And a verse that I have for that illustrates it wonderfully. It's 2 Corinthians 5:21. And it says, God made him, talking about Jesus, who knew no sin, to become sin for us, so that we might become the righteousness of God. And so look at it this way. On one hand, I'll break the verse down. God made him who knew no sin. So we're going to say this is Jesus. Nothing in my hand represents that he is pure, clean, without fault, perfect. And then, so God made him who knew no sin to become sin. So this is us, the other hand, and this is our sin, right? The dirty barnwood. That's what we look like from the inside out. Okay, so God made him who knew no sin to become sin for us, so that we might become the righteousness of God. Y'all tracking with me? And that's what happened on the cross to allow us to become adopted into God's family. So don't miss that. That's pretty key. Let's go to the let's go to the next step. Step 3 is a new way of life. Now you are no longer a slave, but God's own child. And so what we have is this is a barnwood journal. I actually brought one. This is something that I made for Kristen when we were dating. For the life of me, I could not get this girl to like me. So what does a man to do when he can't get a girl to like him? You make her something, right? Gets them almost every time. And so what you have is, from the barn, and you have the capture, and then you have the process in the shop, and you have the new creation. It looks kind of cool, doesn't it? So it has a new purpose. What's that? You guys can all come to the shop and you can make these for maybe that you're interested in. And so there's no going back from this to this. So it makes sense to take wood from the barn to create something like this. Sometimes I joke with the guys at my shop, we're always thinking about new business ideas. And I say, what if we take barnwood furniture, take it apart, and build barns out of it? And they're like, you're an idiot. That doesn't make sense. Like, yep. And so there's no going back. And what I want to make the analogy that once you become adopted into God's family as his child, When you surrender your heart to Him, you become a new creation. There's no getting traded around. There's no leaving the family. There's no getting kicked out. You have been chosen. You've been picked by God to be in His family. Okay? So there's no going back. Check my notes here real quick. I wanted to unpack, just for a few minutes, what it looks like as a church to be defined as sons and daughters, as adopted children. So let's unpack that a little bit. So this is the new way of life, the church as God's children. The first thing for me that came to mind is that as God's kids, we have a new sense of security, a new sense of belonging, in that we have been chosen and that you've been purchased with the blood of Christ. You weren't purchased with a certain amount of money, but something that was way more, infinitely more valuable than any sum of money. So John 1:12 says, "Yet to all who received Him, to those who believed in His name, He gave the right to become children of God." So when your heart is surrendered to God and you're living a repentant lifestyle, you are His child. So with that security, I do this sometimes too. I know you guys probably struggle with it, but don't look to one another for your acceptance or for approval. Don't compare yourself to one another. Jesus says, "I approve you because of the condition of your heart." Okay? So that's one. The second is joy. I love this passage, Hebrews 10. This is a group of believers, a church, and it says, "For you had compassion on those in prison, and you joyfully accepted the plundering of your possessions, because you yourselves knew you had a better possession and an abiding one." So as children of God, our possession is Jesus. Another passage in James says, "Consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds." We have joy that the world doesn't have because we have Christ. And our eternity is secure. So when something of yours gets stolen or wrecked, you wreck your car, maybe when your health isn't so good, maybe when your parents get a divorce, maybe when you have a sibling that's killed, those are awful things and hard things to deal with. But as believers and as children of God, we can still find joy because we have Christ. And Christ can't be taken. The third thing is love. John 3:18. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down His life for us, so we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers. So that's simply just experiencing what I've talked about. The whole journey and the process. Experiencing Jesus invade your life, give you a new heart. Experiencing the gospel personally. And then living that out for other people. It's when you have a new guy that comes in and feels a little awkward, you invade his life. It's also, for me, I like to think about when I was the lost and forgotten barn, looking like crap on the outside and the inside, but yet Jesus still pursued me. It's understanding that and living that out with the people around me. So love, and then the last is obedience. 1 Corinthians 15:10. This is when Paul says, "I am what I am because of the grace of God in me." He says, "I worked harder than everybody else, but not because of me. It was the grace of God in me." So it's experiencing grace, and then spontaneously it overflows into obedience. Sound good? Okay, so just to conclude this last statement here, it's what I said in the beginning. If you forget everything I said, remember this, is that my heart, my passion for us as a group is that we would become a group of people defined by a radical love for God and a sacrificial love for one another. So hopefully there's something that I've shared that has penetrated your heart and would inspire you to move forward in these two areas. We got one more slide. Back to the kids, dancing around the world. Here's our summary from Galatians. God sent his son, so you got the pursuit, so that he could adopt us as his very own children, the captured. And 3, now you are no longer a slave, but God's own child. And so to finish, just with a question, and I don't want you to look to the left or the right, but to search your own heart, and just think about where are you in that whole process. Are you feeling like you're the barn that's out in the middle of the 1,000-acre farm that nobody knows about, that's broken? Have you came to acknowledge that you have someone who is similar to me in how I hunt down the barnwood, but is so much greater in how he has been pursuing you really all the years of your life? Have you understood that? Do you see it? Are you tasting it? Or are you number 3? Are you, without a doubt, an adopted son or daughter of God? Are you a child of God? And are you pursuing that new way of life? So think about that, and if that's on your heart this week, talk to Kristen or Corey or anybody. Let's pray. Father, we are just reminded this morning of a great gospel. We're reminded that we have a great God who doesn't ignore us, who doesn't, like a barn, doesn't tear us down or burn us up, but actually sees value and sees potential in us. Thanks for not throwing us out, but for giving us a second chance, and a third chance, and a fourth chance, and a fifth chance. We just want to say that we love you, and we're so delighted to be your kids. Now we ask, God, that you would inspire us, motivate us to live that new identity, that new life that you have for us. And in Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Awesome.